Okay. Good morning, everyone. Officially, welcome to Monday. It seems like we have kind of a low energy, low key start here. What I wanted to do quickly is just review that sources assignment for you. We had, I think the, the people who kind of understood what they were supposed to do did it fairly well. And I think those who maybe misunderstood what they were supposed to do need to do a little more. And so I'm just going to review what we needed to do, and then I'll move on and I'll ask your opinion on something, okay? So, of course, what you needed to do was provide me with a works cited, so a list of your sources, 6 sources. If you had more, that's okay, but at least 6. You had to make sure that list was formatted in MLA format, and I gave you a link to that. And then you had to provide me with one of those forms, one of those crap forms for each one of your sources, right? And kind of answer the questions, checking off yes or no, right? And again, I think most people understood that that's what they had to do, and they did it just fine. The only place people really stumbled, the first place they stumbled is that they didn't realize they had to do both of those things, okay? So and I can't really speak to that, but what I can speak to is maybe some of the places people stumbled in their, let's see, in their works cited. So I'm going to borrow this one because it was done really well, and so I'd like to kind of use it as an example if I could. So you can see here, works cited at the end. It's got works cited titled at the top. And then there's a few places that people go wrong, okay? The first place is that they don't alphabetize them. So you can see this one's got it nicely alphabetized. It's according to either the last name of the author, or if there is no author, then it's by the title of the work, okay? So alphabetization is something that people normally miss, but things have to be alphabetized, okay? The second thing you'll want to watch for is usually the title is in quotes, and then what the title is in is italicized, okay? So sometimes it's a website, sometimes it's a journal or a magazine. You have to you did just fine. You don't have to.
I did it wrong. I didn't
That's
put
okay.
it in alphabetical order.
That's okay. I mean, this is a learning exercise, and this is a pain in the butt to do. Nobody likes doing this, but you know, we just gotta sweat out the detail on it a little bit. And again, some people did really well. This individual here did really well. But yeah, so the title is usually in quotations. What the article occurs in is usually in italics, right? So if it's a web page or a journal or a magazine or whatever it is. There's usually a link if it's an electronic source, and pretty much all sources I think are electronic for you guys. I don't think did anyone consider going to like a library and pulling a paper book off the shelf?
No.
No. No. I don't blame you, it's a lot of work. Although, as a university tip, and I don't know if maybe there's easier ways to do this nowadays, but what used to actually really work for me is find a few books that really worked, and then you go up in the library, you find them, and then just like look at all the books around them, because they're often the same subject matter. So sometimes you can find things a lot easier, if you can just get yourself in the right spot in the library, and then just look at all the books around it and see if there's anything there, because sometimes just by the title you're like, oh, that'll be good and useful. But anyway, I'm sure that by the time you guys get to university, you won't want to go to a real library. You'll do it all online, which is much easier. Anyway, so online sources, you've got a link there, which is good. Sometimes for library sources, sometimes they'll suggest that they'll give you a permalink kind of thing, a link that won't, just in case the source gets moved to another kind of website location, the link will always follow it kind of thing. I don't worry too much about that right now, but if you see it, you'll know what it is. And then sometimes people miss the accessed on date, right? And that's important because online sources can change, right? Printed books don't change, but people can always update a website or change what's there. So it's often it's required here by MLA to show when you actually looked at that website, right? So we know that if you say something and then I go back and look at the website and it's not there, at least I can say, oh, that's because you looked at it on the 16th of November and I looked at it in December, and so something was updated or something was changed, right? You looked at an earlier version than me, okay? So that's kind of the tricky part of the works cited, but again, this one's done really well, nice and neat, everything's lined up, everything's there. Yeah, that's good. That's what I want to see. And lots of people did that or close to that. If you didn't, then I think you have a little bit of kind of touch up or reformatting to do. Again, I know it's not fun. I know it's a pain in the butt. Everything I ever wrote in university, this is a pain to do, but you have to do it. So we have to do it here. But for the people who kind of understood what they were supposed to do, yeah, I think it went pretty well. And a couple of formatting errors here and there is no big deal. I just wanted you to make the attempt to do it, right? And again, most people did. So for the most part, I'm happy with what I saw that way. Okay. So that said, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to give you some more time to work on your presentation this morning, or would you like to continue with some racism stuff? I'll give you the option.
What was the thing you said you wanted to say after explaining the?
I wanted to give you. I wanted your opinion on something, and this is your opinion. What would you like to do? Would you like time to work on your presentation, or do you want me to continue with racism stuff?
Following
Everybody's looking this way. What do you think?
Analyze the presentation. Yeah.
You want to work?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. That's why I asked. Okay, so do you want to? How about we do this? We'll work until 9, and then I'll check in with you and see if you want to do some social justice stuff or if you want to continue working. Is that okay? Okay. All right, so online people, same thing, of course. I'll give you until 9 to work, and then I'll check back in with you, and we'll see where we are. Okay. So I'll just put up another screen here, but if you want to message me, I'll be around and I can respond to you. Okay. So I'll check in with you at 9 and see how we're doing. Okay. Okay, everyone. So I just thought I'd check in. It's been about an hour or so. Would you like to keep working or would you like to do some social justice stuff? Your choice. Eunice is looking at Naughty. Naughty's looking at Eunice. You guys want to keep working? It's okay if you do.
How much like things do we have left like to discuss for the
A number of things which I will try to sort of squeeze in. I mean, you know, we'll get done what we can in the time we have left. But I mean, I have stuff. I have stuff in my back pocket.
Personally, I think we should how do you say?
I should go and take a nap in another room. How did
If
you?
you want to, you can.
How did you know exactly what I was thinking, Eunice? What were you gonna say?
No, because there's still a week left before it's due, right? And we have the weekend to work over the project, so I think we should maybe squeeze in some learning.
Some social justice. I will give you some more time to work on this week as well, right? So this is not the end of class time. Maybe on Wednesday I'll give you some more time as well. Okay. Well, you want to switch gears then, and okay. So I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to just get ready, and then we'll start. Okay. So I'll just go here, put a little timer up, 2 minutes, and then we'll start. Yep.
It's gonna be a long 2 weeks until finish finals. Then I get to go on my holiday and finally.
Mm-hmm.
Time flies, so I hope the 2 weeks pass by really fast.
I think it'll go really fast. Eunice.
Starting to feel the stress that finals are.
Yeah. It's always the way, hey?
Do you have the exact schedule, sir, or is that in the website? The final schedule?
Final exam schedule? Yeah, you've asked about that before. Let me just check. It should be on the website.
I think it is, but I'm not sure.
It should be. Where is it now? Current students. This website is not very good. Current students, events, timetables. Final exam schedule. Yeah, see, they've got the.
Well, for social justice, we're not gonna have you said it
Here it is. Okay, it's in yellow. So. Yeah. So I see. So Tuesday at 1. There's some high school.
How does that work though? You just come in at 1?
Yep. Yeah. So there's no classes that week, and you'll just come in for your exams. Yeah. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Oh, lucky we're not having an exam in this course, or it would be on the last day. Okay, there we go. Glad it's up. All right, people, can we begin? All right, here we go. So, let's see. So last week on Friday, We had just finished reading that academic article on race and gender oppression in the classroom, and we said that it seemed that white male students seemed to be acting in ways that was troublesome for female or women faculty of color, right? And so they were these professors found that these white male students were kind of challenging their authority or their teaching competency or their subject expertise. In some cases, a few students kind of exhibited threatening behavior, which is 100% not cool. But I said, well, why are these guys acting this way? Or more specifically, why does it seem to be white male students that are behaving in this way and not other students, right? And I said that one of the things that's happening here is that white male students are getting certain messages broadcast to them by society, right? And so I suggested that lots of the television and movies that we see have kind of white and often white male characters at the center of the story. Now again, in the last couple of years that's been changing, which is fantastic, right? But in the past we've seen lots of TV and movies is the stories of white people told by white people, right? And so, sometimes we have characters of color that are kind of thrown in there so they can say, look, we're diverse, right? But really, it's not really centering those characters, right? It's centering the white ones, right? And the white ones are the kind of most important one, right? Yeah, so even a show like Friends, which is still great, right? It's a funny show. People, have been enjoying it for decades now. But it has been criticized as being a very white show. There's just not a lot of characters of color on that show. Again, the Justice League. Not a lot of minorities represented there either, right? Except for a green guy who's, not even from Earth, right? Like we can't have a black person on the Justice League before we get some green guy from Mars. Like, come on. Even if we turn to religion, right? We said that often, Jesus is portrayed as a white man, but coming from the area of the world that he did, he probably wouldn't have looked like this. He probably would have looked a little more like this, right? This is a more typical face of a man living in Palestine 2,000 years ago. Right? And again, when we see religious figures portrayed in art, this is sort of, I think, Renaissance art or sort of late medieval art, but often biblical characters, saints, Adam and Eve here, all of those people are portrayed as white people, right? And it's kind of interesting to think of the sort of sum total of all these messages, right? Because they're not really about power, they're not really about racism, but they do kind of introduce the idea. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Not bad, thank you.
Yeah? Any questions in the big pink box yet?
No. Actually, there was one comment. There's a couple of questions saying thank you for doing this, but there was a comment saying, I think you guys are having mental problems. So I have to address that one, but since there's only been one actual question, I'm going to wait until last week.
See if we can get some more questions to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions that you would like Tom to answer about sexuality, about LGBTQ people, about gender or transgender issues, maybe even just relationships in that regard.
I am happy to tell you what I know.
Yeah. And Tom knows a lot.
Because I've been on the planet for a long time.
Tom's forgotten more than I'll ever know.
I don't think that's true.
Sorry, I interrupted there. What's happening here, I think, is that society is introducing these messages, and it suggests to these white males that, that their perspective is the correct one, right? The way I see the world is the way it is, right? Because everything I see in the media kind of reinforces the idea that my perspective is correct, right? The way I see the world is the way that all the media sees the world, and therefore I must be right. And again, we learned at the beginning of the course that's not really true, right? We all see the world and kind of perceive society just a little bit differently, right? Depending on our background and our upbringing and who we are and what we look like, everybody experiences a little different, right? But when one of our perspectives is shown all the time, it makes it seem as if that's the only one, right? And that's the correct one. And so sometimes, white people struggle with the idea that what they see is not how it is, right? Because again, their view is supported so many times in so many places, right? If we go back to the movies, for instance, I said that lots of those movies feature white characters, but who's telling those stories? Well, here's some statistics for you. Of the 25 highest grossing films worldwide, all of them were directed by men, right? Except for, and all were directed by white men, except for, one man of color for Furious 7, and a woman co-director for Frozen, right? But other than that, those stories are all written and directed by white men. Right? The top 100 films worldwide, 99 are directed by men, and 95 by white people. Right? And again, it's not to say anything bad about white people or white directors, but it is saying that really one perspective is showing up all the time, right? Stories are only being told about one group of people at the expense of everybody else. And other people have stories too, right? Women have stories too. It's like that Bechdel test thing, right? Where the rule you had to pass was that you had to have two female characters who talk to each other about something other than the man or men, right? And it's shocking.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
thanks. I'm glad they're having fun out there, but the idea of having two women characters that talk to each other about something other than men is a surprisingly hard, hurdle to get over, and it shouldn't be, right? Because women in the class here, I think you would agree that you talk about all kinds of things in addition to guys, right? Sometimes it's guys, but there's lots of other things. But the movies kind of suggest that no, that's all women talk about is us all the time. It's because we're so cool, right? And similarly, again, you're seeing only you're seeing one perspective, right? You're seeing things through the eyes of men. You're seeing things through the eyes of white people. And again, there's lots of stories out there and lots of different perspectives out there. And so it's not that these white guys are doing anything wrong. It's just that it's too much, right? There's other people need the microphone sometimes, right? You know what I'm saying?
Like in the karaoke, other people need to sing too.
Yeah, other people need to sing too. The other thing that you kind of sometimes see in film is films that are sort of position white people in a heroic way at the expense of non-white people. And often this is called a white savior movie. Okay? So in white savior movies, there's a bunch of them. The one on the far right is a joke. I'm quite certain it's not a real movie. It's just a joke. But the other ones are not. Okay, the other ones are not. And all of them are kind of based on historical events or historical time periods. And again, in some ways there's nothing wrong with these movies, right? But in other ways, they are kind of problematic because often what you see in movies like this, where the white character is the main character and the hero, you see them often, kind of rescuing people, right? So you'll see the white character is the hero, and usually he or she is able to rescue people of color, right? And the people of color are often unable to rescue themselves. They're kind of passive and they're like, oh, what do we do? And then the white guy kind of shows up to solve everything, right? Sometimes we see this kind of movie happen in, kind of foreign locations, or at least foreign for the Western world. Sometimes in Africa, sometimes in India, sometimes in other places. Sometimes you'll see this play out in terms of an adoption story, right? So a white woman adopts a child of color, right? And it's quite there's all sorts of emotional drama about this kid who's kind of stuck between two worlds, right? But often it's kind of a little more her story than the story of the child, right? So she's kind of heroically rescuing this child from, the ghetto or whatever, right? And again, these stories can be based on real stories, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they're based on real characters, but often the way they're portrayed is that, the white person is the hero, right? And the people of color are either the bad guys, or they're just kind of, they don't seem to be able to help themselves in any way, right? And think about when we read that little thing about the people with the three eyes. Remember that? Yeah.
Oh,
So remember the play that the two-eyed person went to, where the three-eyed person was, I've lost my third eye. Life is not worth living, right? And the two-eyed people were kind of portrayed as, these tragic, sad people who, just couldn't live a full life because they didn't have a third eye, right? And again, that's kind of ridiculous, the three-eye thing. But sometimes in these kind of white savior movies, that's what you see, right? You see the idea that, the people of color, their existence is terrible and awful, and the white person has to come in and rescue them, or the white person has to come in and rescue one individual, right, and save them from this horrible plight, right? And again, sometimes there's a historical kind of basis to this, but the movie kind of frames things in a particular way. And, in the spirit of me ruining a lot of things, growing up, I loved and still love the Indiana Jones movies. And this one, Temple of Doom, from I think 1984, the second one of the trilogy, not thought of to be the best one, but still okay, is a perfect white savior movie. Indiana Jones here, his plane crashes in India, so he literally falls from the sky and rescues this village of Indian people and all their children from an evil cult. Sorry, spoiler alert. And so, again, it's not really trying to do anything bad here. What's that?
It doesn't show anything. It's
It's so
so simple.
simple?
This one.
Yeah. Like, you've seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
It's,
is not that too much racist.
well, there's not too much racism?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is that you don't have to. Sometimes it's the way in which
I mean, it's not shown, it's not obvious. You have to go through it. And
yeah,
if you're going to be really, really detailed, then
it's true. Most people wouldn't pick it up, right? When you watch it, I certainly watched it a lot of times and never really thought anything of it. And there are good things about the movie, right? Like, yes, he does show up in this Indian village and he does save all these Indian villagers. And, I think he shows a lot of compassion towards the people in the village, and he shows a lot of respect for them too, right? He respects their beliefs and customs. He knows how to speak some of the language, so he speaks with them. He actually is, he's a good character.
isn't this actually the producer should like put a black main character also?
And
I mean, like what? So imagine you're the producer. What would you do?
well, that's the tricky thing, right? Is that that's in thinking about these things. Not everything is so kind of reducible to simplicity, right? So, the main character or the main villains in this film are Indian, right? They're brown people, and again, that makes sense, right? For him to show up in, for his plane to crash in the middle of rural India, and to find a white bad guy would just be kind of strange, right? It just wouldn't really make a lot of sense in the story. So yeah, like and there's those parts of it are kind of okay. The idea here is kind of the framing of him as the hero, and not even that, but the fact that it follows a pattern, right? Like if this was the only movie like that, it wouldn't be a big deal, right? It'd be like, okay, this is what happens in this movie, whatever, right? But the idea is that when you kind of see the same underlying pattern over and over again, the idea is like, oh, okay, something interesting is happening here. Yeah, something interesting is happening here. We constantly see, this white person acting as a savior, right? As a rescuer. And again, sometimes, there's historical evidence of that. Sometimes it's a reasonably true story, but at the expense of what I showed you here, you can see that again, we're really seeing one kind of perspective, right? We're kind of telling stories through the eyes of only one group, and we need more stories, right? People of color have stories too, and we need to see those, right? We need to experience those.
So that one you're talking about is completely definitely correct, but in some series, like they just decide for just supporting. They think it is support, so we're just supporting either LGBTQ or like black color or anything. They just change the whole series and try to support them. This is not a support. It's kind of like, okay, see, we have done this. It's just to show that show a manner of supporting, which is not actually.
Can you give me an example of something you're thinking
Okay,
of?
for example, there was this actually rumor that they were going to change the main character of Batman to actually black color person.
To a black person?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was kind of like yeah, just like the producer was like, yeah, I'm supporting it, but it wasn't actually a support. It was just, changing everything.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The idea of taking characters that are traditionally white and then talking about casting a black person as them, and yeah, like
That was not a really good support. It was like, yeah, but you see, like the producer might have seen this concept from this view that, okay, people have to see what we have done, and then just this persuade we have helped them.
yeah.
But this is not a support. This is just ruining the whole thing.
What do you think about that? What do you think about characters that are, like Batman is one of them, James Bond is another one who people have talked about. Maybe it's time for a black Bond, right? Idris Elba's name has come up quite a bit. He'd be badass, but still. What do you think about that? Does that help? Is that useful to take a traditionally white character and cast a black actor?
This is just like imagine a movie. All the characters are straight.
Okay.
So and then suddenly for next season, you change the whole thing to LGBT.
Okay.
I mean, like all the characters are not straight anymore.
Okay.
And that would be same as this thing.
Well, that would be kind of strange for people's sexuality to sort of change, to all change next
Just
season,
support
right?
them.
Yeah. It's like, oh, everybody's gay now. Whoops. Right? Like that would be,
Whoops.
yeah, that would be kind of a strange narrative twist, right?
Maybe changing some of them, the plot lines, so they understand this not what they're doing, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that would be okay, but the changing the whole thing would be awkward.
Sometimes, yeah. Actually, Marvel Comics had a pretty good idea, or has a nice workaround for that in having a multiverse, right? So they can have white male Spider-Man, right, in one universe, and then in another universe you can have Miles Morales, right, a black Hispanic
Oh, there was
teenager.
one, right? Spider-Man. Um, I think it was the animation version.
Yeah.
He was.
And also the game as well.
And what?
The game as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so that Marvel's got, yeah, they've got it, they can have it both ways,
So
right?
that's a pretty good idea to just handle the whole thing.
Yeah.
They wonder about changing the whole thing to a new personality and then making a traditional character to changing them.
Yeah.
That would be weird.
It would be weird, but yeah, they've got a neat workaround to be able to, you can keep,
That was nice and
yeah, you can keep Peter Parker, but you can also have this other story that's sort of the same, but also not.
this is an appropriate thing.
Yeah, and because who Miles Morales is, makes sense, right? Like he makes sense as a character and who he is, and he's not Peter Parker.
But if you change the Peter Parker, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
No, right? So yeah, but I think that's kind of, I think, both of our points, or that's all the things we're talking about, right? Is that it doesn't make sense to simply stick a black actor into the story of a white character. The character's story has to make sense too, right? And Peter Parker maybe doesn't make as much sense as a black person, but Miles does, right? Miles Morales does make sense, right? Because Miles has his own backstory, right? He has a different family, right? His parents weren't killed. He wasn't raised by his aunt and his uncle, right? It's not. So he's got a totally different backstory. Yeah, but then that works, right? Yeah, but again, there needs to be room for other stories, right? And in the past, we haven't really seen that. Now we're getting to the point where, yeah, we are seeing that stuff, right? And some people like Marvel have a really unique workaround to be able to keep their traditional characters, but they can also spin them differently in other universes, right? They can take what's cool and then they can kind of reimagine it, right? Which is nice. So we sit here. This is the last thing I'll say for today because I do have something for you to read, but we don't have time to do it today. We said that basically in North America here, white people are the dominant group, right? They have historical power. White people are mostly in charge of social institutions. They're mostly in charge of media and social messaging. And so they're really the ones that have the power, right? They're also a numerical majority as well. Not that necessarily makes a difference, but they are a numerical majority and they hold power. But there's lots of white supremacists out there that don't agree with that idea, okay? They in fact feel that they are under threat, that the racism is kind of happening towards them, not towards other people. And so I wanted to kind of work through that and just see where these ideas are coming from, okay? But that's something that we'll save for tomorrow, okay? So maybe what I'll do is I'll pause it there. Tomorrow we'll do some white supremacy stuff, and then I think we'll probably be able to end racism and move on to just a little bit of religious oppression stuff.
And racism.
End racism. Oh yeah.
Around the world,
Yes,
that's
we're going
good.
to solve it tomorrow, Eunice, as we do every term. Okay, so that's all I have for you then. You can pack it up. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon. Bon voyage. Okay, see you.